Today, we are going to deep dive into MVVM, Model-View-ViewModel with data binding and commanding for Xamarin.Forms. So tune in. All right, welcome back everyone to another Xamarin 101. I'm really excited because today is one of my favorite topics. It is all about architecture, specifically around MVVM. This is one of the core fundamental building blocks of building applications with Xamarin.Forms because it really enables you to sort of really separate your code. And with data binding, it enables you to really write less code and be way more productive when you're building user interfaces. And the cool part about MVVM and data binding is, like I said, it enables you to separate that code, but there's a lot of magic that enables you to automatically have the user interface update for you when you change values. And additionally, vice versa, when you change values in the UI, it updates over in the code behind too. So I normally don't do this, but we're actually going to go through a few slides because I think that really, exemplifies how MVVM needs to be sort of taught in a way. And then we're going to write some code. Then we're going to talk about commanding, which is part of MVVM and data binding. And then we're going to finish it up. So let's head over here. All right, so MVVM, data binding, they're actually two separate things. MVVM is just an architectural pattern, and data binding is like the good, awesome stuff that makes all that magical user interface update in real time. So when we talk about MVVM, I like to put it in sort of a few boxes here, where the view, that is our user interface. That's that XAML that we've been creating so far, and it's how to display information. Because we put a label, we put a button, it's how we're displaying our UI and our information. Now our view model, you can sort of think of this as the code behind of your view, but it's most likely going to be abstracted into a separate file, which can be easily unit testable. So here's how the flow goes. The view can send data over to the view model and vice versa. But the view will always send events. So data, let's say you enter something into a text box, it will then update the view model, the actual property, or if you update the view model property, it will update the UI. Events is like if the user interacts with the UI, it can then notify the view model that, hey, something is happening. And then you have this model over here, and that's just really our business logic, our data objects. This may be interactions with a web service, with a database, or it just might be a person class or a monkey class or something like that. It's just data. And the idea here is that is separated from your view. So you can change the abstraction. Maybe today you're hitting an Azure backend or a SQL backend, but you need to change it out for Azure Function backend. You might, put that separate logic. So that way your view and your view model don't really care. They're just really of, here's how I display it, here's the data, and here's the actual data objects, how I'm gathering them. So it's sort of this nice separation here. Now, the cool part about MVVM is this magical bit that lives between the view and the view model, and that is data binding. And it's built directly into Xamarin.Forms. To do anything, it's all built in, all the data binding, magic, gobbledygook awesomeness is all in there. So the core of data binding is something that we call INotifyPropertyChanged. And this is an interface that Xamarin.Forms is listening to be notified when you change something in your code behind. Now, there's a bunch of different libraries like MVVM helpers, the Xamarin Community Toolkit, and actually a Xamarin.Forms page already implement INotifyPropertyChanged. But this is sort of the core here of what it would look like, and we'll go through this and we'll write the code as well. And then next week, we'll take a look at MVVM helpers. But this is sort of the core, is INotifyPropertyChanged has an event handler that Xamarin.Forms is subscribing to, and it's all based on the name of the property. So what this means in practice is if I had a person class of first name, last name, for example, first name here, I would, for example, have a normal return of, let me get my first name. And then the set, whenever I set it, I will say onPropertyChanged equals first name. And we'll do this when we take our current application, which is counting up, and we'll automatically do this. And we'll see that in the UI, which is cool. So There's a few ways to do this. If we're doing code behind in C#, you can actually say set binding, and we'll say the property name and then whatever the property is. So first name, first name. Most of us will do this in our XAML code behind. If you're doing XAML, and that's what we'll be doing here today. And this is a really cool binding syntax where you just say binding first name, boom, you're good to go. So that's really, really easy. Another thing that you can do is you can have different modes. And Xamarin.Forms is really smart about picking the default mode for it. Like a label, it's only ever going to be one way, which is from your code behind to the user interface, where an entry that you type in will be two-way, which means that the UI can update the code behind and the code behind can update the UI, which is very, very nice. So just be aware that there's a few different modes, and I'll put links to the documentation below too. So let's go ahead and do it over here. All right. So here we are inside of our application. This is what we saw before. If you watched the previous episode, I'll put a link over in one of those corners and in below. It's in the Xamarin 101 playlist here. But it's a simple application that says you clicked this many times. Okay? So every time I click it, it updates the count. Now how this works is that I have a user interface that is very simple. It has a label and has a button. So button clicked, and then here I have a label that is says click me. Here I've named these with label count and button click. And if I go into the code behind over here, let me go ahead and open this up over here. Here we go. I think I'm in this page. There we go. We can see that I have an int count equals 0. And then I have a click event that says button click underscore clicked. And when that click event happens, I manually update the label every single time. So I have to get reference to that label, update the code behind, and go from there. So that's quite a lot of code that I would be putting in there. So let's modify this here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this count, but I'm going to create a public count here. And I'm going to say string, because I'm going to display a string. I could also do string formatting inside of my user interface, but we're just going to have a string for right now. And I'm just going to say count display. We'll just call it that. And here what we'll do is we will go ahead and say we're going to need a code behind of string, count display. And here we're going to say click me. There we go. That'll be our default that we have in there. And then we'll do a get. And the get here will just return the current count display. And then on the set, there's a few things here. We're in the code behind of the Xamarin.Forms page. And if we actually right click and say go to definition, we'll see that this is a templated page. If I go deeper, this is a page. If I go deeper, this is a visual element. If I go deeper one more time and I go to definition, we'll see that this is actually a navigable element. There's all these interfaces that it implements. And if I go deeper into it, we'll see that this is an element. And if I go deeper, we'll see that there's a bindable object. This is built into Xamarin.Forms. And if we go into that one, look at all this hierarchy. We'll see that there is INotifyPropertyChanged. It's built in. It's right there, which is nice. So what I'll do here is I'm going to say if the current value that you're setting it to equals the count display, then let's just return, because it's the same value. You don't need to do anything. Else, if they're different, we'll say count display equals value. And then what I'll do here is I'll say on property changed, which is built in. Let me zoom in here really quick. And what we'll see is that it's on property changed string property name. Now this property name is the name that Xamarin.Forms is going to look for and update in the UI. So that is count display. So there's a few ways of doing this. First and foremost, I can put in count display. I could just put the string in there. I can also come in and I could say name of, okay. And that's really nice because that's a nice C# feature that enables me to right click, rename, and it would rename this for me. And this will just display the string. But traditionally with on property changed events, there is some automagical things that are built in. So if I actually click, I should click down into this one more time, go to definition, go to definition. Let's go to definition. And one more time, go to definition and keep going and going. Here, we're going to actually see that down in this onPropertyChanged right here, that this is a caller member name property. And what's cool about that is that this is part of the automatic compiler settings. So I think it's actually inside of these using statements up here. Yeah, the system runtime compiler services. And what that does is it will automatically, if you're in a property, a member name, it will automatically set it. So if you're inside of a set of a property, you don't even have to put anything in here like that. You can just leave it blank and it will handle it for you automatically. It'll assign it. The reason that you may want to pass in something is, let's say we had another property, which was like, you know, multiplication display. We could also raise that event too, and then we could increase that. So here's what we're going to do is now we have this. Instead of setting this label here, what we're going to do is we're going to say count display equals this. Okay. Now there's, you know, a little bit of magic here going on because I'm just setting this property. It's going to call this and it's going to go ahead and then raise this property changed. Now, the only thing I need to do is I need to set the binding context here. The binding context, since I am setting it to this page, is going to be this. And what this will do is tell Xamarin.Forms to say, hey, listen to myself, subscribe to events on this object. And whenever onPropertyChanged occurs, automatically update it for me. Okay. So let's go back into our UI. And now what's cool here is that we actually don't have to create the backing field at all. We actually don't have to manually set the text property. We can now just say binding to count display. That's it. Okay. So binding count display. And now I'm going to run this again. And what we'll see is that the exact same application will work as expected. We'll get the click events here. And then in our UI, it's going to automatically update for us. So let's let it load up here. And now when I click, you've clicked this many times, which is pretty awesome. So I'm not accessing the variable. I'm not creating the backing fields. Like my UI doesn't know about this. So if I create another label, right, here's what's really cool. If I put, let's say I put in another label and I put this, I guess, underneath, let's put this in, oh, I guess on top. If I do text and I do binding to count display, right, and I hit save there, what we'll see, oops, up top here is that you clicked 28 times. See that? So that's really, really neat because it enables me as a developer to not hard code and, you know, I'm going to say bind because it's the wrong word for it, but basically, you know, restrict my UI and my UI elements to be bound together. This dearly decouples my business logic here. So that really enables me to be very, very productive here in creating this type of code inside of my application, which I think is really, really neat. Now, the other thing I could do at the same time is if I was going to get really crazy, if we maybe set this to entry instead of this here. Now we have this big entry here. So notice here that as I remove this, it's the same data binding. And I say, hello world. Look how it updates below. So the entry is setting the property automatically here via this data binding. And then it is updating the label because it's subscribed to events. Now notice here that if I say click me again, both of them update at the same time. And that's really, really cool. You don't have to worry about what the object is, what the data type is. You can have this really cool, powerful data binding built right into your application. So that's really, really neat. All right. Now, the other part that you may have noticed is that I had to click that button and I had an event. Now, so here our button is directly bound to our user interface via that click event. And this is exactly what we see inside of a lot of our applications is we have a click a button or an item selected or item changed or text entry changed. And whenever your user taps on something, it raises an event. So this means that that logic inside that click handler isn't very testable at all. It's not really decoupled in any way because it is an event handler. To actually raise the event, you'd have to click it. So And additionally, then it has to be handled in this code behind file, right? You have to have these senders, these event args, you have to have all this data in the code behind, and then there's this reference to this event that is kept there. So part of data binding that's really cool is something called commands. And there's an interface for this similar to INotifyPropertyChanged, but it's an ICommand. So an ICommand enables us to do a bunch of things. You can pretty much, for all intents and purposes, just execute the event. And you can additionally pass a parameter into it, which is really nice. We'll get into that maybe in some future episodes. There's also some additional properties such as can execute and an event handler that you can, change your property. So you can implement a function that says, can this method, this command be executed? And Xamarin.Forms will listen and respect that and automatically disable events based on that. So for example, you can have can execute true or false. And when it's false, it will automatically disable that button, which is really, really nice. So this command is just an interface. And luckily, this interface is very, very simple. And additionally, it's already built in with Xamarin.Forms. So again, can execute. This is going to be called to determine whether it's enabled or disabled. Execute, this is actually executing the method. And then can execute is something that we can call manually and raise an event when we're going to change that so the can execute can be recalled. So like I said, Xamarin.Forms has this built in into a bunch of different user interface controls, such as menus, buttons, toolbar items, text cells, and a bunch other. And it looks a little bit like this. It has the same exact properties, if you will, and syntax as the data binding that we saw earlier. The command property on a button, for example, binds to an ICommand. So where I was binding count display, which is a string, I could bind a increase count command to an ICommand. And to implement this thing, what's really cool is that you can also pass in additional parameters. So for example, here, I could pass in a string to a tap gesture recognizer that you could add to anything. And that would pass it down from your UI down into your page. Now, like I said earlier, luckily command and command of T, which is the parameterization of it, are automatically built in to Xamarin.Forms. So here, for example, we see I have a give bonus command, and this command, I just create a brand new one. And I have a Boolean that says can give bonus, and then one that says on give bonus. So let's go ahead and do this really quick here. So what we're going to do is get rid of this nasty clicked handler here. So I'm going to go into the code behind once more, and we're going to create a new public ICommand, and this is going to be called increase count. And I'll just say get. So here it's going to ask me to import my system Windows input. This is a standard system interface. And then what I'm going to do is come up here and I'm going to say increase count equals new command, and that's built in to Xamarin.Forms. So here's this command and command of T. I'm going to say on increase. Okay. Actually, I just need to pass that there. Now, what on command takes is a few different things, actually. So it takes an action, which would just be a method that's a void. It can take an action with an object. It can take an action and a function that returns a Boolean, or both a parameterized object and parameterized function. So if you're passing strings around, you could do that too inside there. So let's hop out here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of creating this button clicked event, I'm going to say void on increase here. There we go. And see how it goes away. So it's just a method that's going to take in. And we're just going to go ahead and take these two and put it right here. There we go. Perfect. So now a bunch of our code is really decoupled here, because now I can go back into my UI over here. Instead of saying clicked, I can say command, and I'll say binding to on increase. Oh, sorry, increase. What did I call it? increase count. There we go. Perfect. And then I can get rid of this name. So I don't need to access it from the code behind anymore. All right. So that enables me to say, hey, command, increase this count. And optionally, I could pass in things. I could pass in a number in there to say, increase it by 2, increase it by 4, increase it by 5, as many as you want. You can continuously do that. Okay. So here we go. Our application is loading up one more time over here. And let's get rid of this entry. We don't really need that. There we go. And now when I click it, notice that it automatically calls this code behind for me. I'm going to click it. It automatically clicks it for me. My count is the same. My string is here, and it is good to go. So here comes the power of it. Right now, we just got started. Everything is inside of this file. Let's go ahead and add a new view model. I'm going to say new item. And this is called our coffee equipment page. So I'm going to call this our coffee equipment view model. I like to sort of name my view models the same as my page. I have a coffee equipment page, coffee equipment view model. We're going to make this public. And here, what we can do is we can just say bindable object, because that is built into Xamarin.Forms, right? It can just be one. It's just built right in. Now, there are other things like Prism and MVVM Lite and Xamarin Community Toolkit and MVVM helpers that have their own bindable objects with nice things, and we'll look at those in the future. But it's built in. And look at all that documentation. It's all right there. So now what I can do is I can take all of this code. Check this out. Boop. I can pull it into my view model. And here, we'll just simply pull out this initializer. I'm going to say public coffee equipment view model, set that method there, bring in this ICommand. There we go. Awesome. Now we're sort of getting there. We're good to go. Now I could do a few things here. This is interesting. I could, for instance, say new coffee equipment view model, same exact thing over here. So I could then bring in this namespace, and that will work, okay? That will totally work just fine. The other thing I could do is come over into my view here, and I could say content page dot binding context. I'm going to say local view models, and I'm going to say local. Let me do view models. Sorry, view models, live coding. Paste that in. Visual Studio will bring in our namespace for us. There we go. And now we've set our binding context in our code. So whenever the page is created, it will automatically set this. So it'll be a new instance every time. So you have to decide if that's what you want. But one of the nice things with that is, check this out. If I zoom in here, let me zoom in here one more time, is that now when I set a binding on this label, for example, I get count display right here inside of it. So it gets everything that's part of it. So here's my count display. Boom. Just get that right built in, which is really cool by setting the binding context that's here. Now, additionally, one other thing that we can do is I can say x : data type, and I can say view models, coffee view models. This line of code right here, okay? The data type, this is called compiled bindings. And what this does, it will increase my performance of data binding, and additionally will give me checks when I compile my code. So if I was to, for example, mistype display count here, check this out. Binding count display was not found, right? So a bunch of things I just did there. Okay, the first thing is I set the binding context. That gives me IntelliSense. So ideally, I won't type that wrong because it'll be inside of here. Then I set x : data type, which is a standard syntax here. That gives me compiled bindings. Again, I'll put this all in the show notes for you to take a look at. That's going to improve my performance and also give me compile time checks. Okay, cool. So now check this out. Our code behind it's empty. It's blank. It's good to go. There's nothing here. This view model could be in a completely separate file completely separate. It already isn't a file, but it's completely a separate assembly, for example, a different project, and would work just fine. So check this out. Now, click me. It works exactly the same. Now our code is completely decoupled from our user interface 100%, and we are completely good to go. Now we can take that view model, completely test it to make sure that when I call that method, it actually increases our count. Now for my user interface, that again is completely decoupled. There's no x:names. There's no click handler events. There's no manually setting properties. Everything is there magically for us. That is MVVM in a nutshell. That is our data binding. That is our commanding. That is our architecture in our application. All right, that is just really an MVVM 101. There's quite a lot more that we can tap into for MVVM, but even just knowing this alone will get you, I would say, 95% the way there. I'll, of course, link to documentation from Xamarin.Forms for data binding and XAML and MVVM goodness in there. But I really hope that you found this video really insightful, gets you off the ground running, doing MVVM and being super productive. Because once you do this once, you're just going to start knocking out all this code, all your data bindings, all that stuff. Now, don't forget that every single week I'm putting out brand new episodes right here on my YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe and ding that notification bell. Not only am I putting out brand new stuff on Xamarin, but I'm also putting up my live streams that I'm doing every single week on Twitch on Fridays at twitch.tv/JamesMontemagno. The latest series is me recreating the user interface of the Peloton fitness application. So tune in to a few of those. I'll also put those up in the corner over here, but also make sure you subscribe, ding that bell one more time, just to really make sure you're in there so you get notified every time I have a brand new episode. Anyways, I hope that you super enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments below, give it a thumbs up, and I'll know that you want me to make more of this type of content. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno. Thanks for watching and have a good one.